BBC News at midday. The former Prime Minister David Cameron has started giving evidence to the public inquiry into the UK's response to the COVID pandemic. The first phase of the inquiry is examining preparations for a pandemic before 2020, when the virus struck. And Mr Cameron is set to be quizzed about the impact of his government's austerity policy on those plans. Speaking in the past hour, he acknowledged that ministers and officials may have been too focused on the threat of a future flu pandemic.
So much time was spent on a pandemic influenza, and that was seen as the greatest danger, and we've had flus, we had very bad years for flus, so it is a big danger. But why wasn't more time and more questions asked about what turned out to be the pandemic that we faced? And it's very hard to answer why that's the case.
MPs will decide later whether to endorse a report that found Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties in Number 10. The Privileges Committee said the former Prime Minister should have been suspended from the Commons for 90 days if he had remained an MP. Rishi Sunak has repeatedly refused to confirm if he will vote on approving the report. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, urged the Prime Minister to do so.
I want to see the Prime Minister there when I arrive back in Parliament, because he has to show leadership. What his predecessor got up to was unacceptable. If the Prime Minister wants to lead, he has to come in to Parliament and vote in this debate this afternoon to show where he stands on this issue.
Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to end new North Sea oil and gas exploration if Labour wins the next election. He's vowed to cut bills, create jobs and provide energy security, while also helping communities affected by the policy to profit from clean power projects. Sir Keir also confirmed that a previously announced publicly owned green energy company would be based in Scotland. The Financial Information Service Moneyfax says the average 2-year fixed mortgage deal has an interest rate of more than 6% for the first time this year. Lenders have been increasing the rates on home loans on the expectation of the Bank of England's base rate being higher for longer. Here's our cost of living correspondent Kevin Peachy.
The last time the typical 2-year fixed mortgage deal was above 6% was at the start of December last year. Back then, the fallout from the mini-budget during Liz Truss's premiership had pushed up the typical 2-year rate to a peak of 6.65%. Now, mortgage rates are on the rise again, driven by concerns over high inflation and strong pay growth. That could mean homeowners having to pay hundreds of pounds more a month in repayments on a new deal compared with one just coming to an end.
China's President Xi Jinping says his country has made progress with the US on a number of issues after talks in Beijing between senior officials, including the American Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Mr. Xi described the discussions as candid and in-depth and said he hoped Mr. Blinken's visit would lead to more stable relations between the two superpowers. Palestinian health officials say at least 3 people, including a 15-year-old boy, have been killed by Israeli troops in a refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Eyewitnesses say masked soldiers stormed a house in Jenin. From Jerusalem, here's our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman.
This is the first time in years the Israeli military has been known to use attack helicopters in the occupied West Bank, reportedly firing at militants on the ground as its forces tried to extract soldiers. Troops in armoured carriers and jeeps had raided Jenin early in the morning, the army says, to arrest 2 militants. In what marks a continuing escalation surrounding the military raids, militants targeted jeeps with improvised explosives, one appearing to hit a vehicle, while videos then show an Israeli attack helicopter firing missiles said to be towards gunmen on the ground.
The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, has been criticised after being filmed downing a bottle of beer with Toulouse's rugby players as they celebrated winning the French league title. An opposition MP accused him of toxic masculinity, while addiction charities said it was inappropriate behaviour. BBC News.